So, I heard you're looking for a go-to source for entertainment.
Wait for it.
Gaming?
Wait for it.
Anime?
Plus Ultra!
Mr. Eric Almighty and Phil the Filipino? Yeah, they've got you covered. And all you gotta do is... wait for it. This is the Wait For It podcast.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Wait For It podcast. I am your co-host Phil Barrera, aka Phil the Filipino.
And I'm your other co-host, Mr. Eric Almighty. And for this episode, we have finally decided to tackle a movie when it comes to anime or international films around the holidays, specifically Christmas, that is on every list. And we're going to be covering Tokyo Godfathers finally on International Feature.
Yes, we have had this one kind of circled and on the list for, I would say, a couple of years now, probably since we started doing International Feature. And it's always, when it comes to these older films, especially when it comes to anime, I am always very hesitant and a little afraid to tackle these films just because of my track record so far, specifically, of course, with Studio Ghibli. But this is from a whole different director, Eric, who is honestly probably just as renowned as Miyazaki, even though, Satoshi Kon is no longer with us, and to the, I think, the detriment of animation everywhere, to give you guys a little maybe teaser as to how this episode is going to go. But literally, because I watched plenty of videos about this film, and every single person just came away with an overwhelming kind of grief that Satoshi Kon is no longer with us because of what he could possibly do in modern day. So excited to break this down with you and talk about this film that I know so many people hold in very, very high regard.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up just kind of from the get-go, because there are a ton of films here, Phil, that are in very, very popular discussions in anime circles. So you've got films here like Paprika, Paranoia Agent, Perfect Blue, Magnetic Rose, a film we were supposed to watch for a local library. That never happened. They never called us back. But these are all films.
Oh, that's why that felt so familiar.
That hurt. Millennium Actress, another one. All these films.
Paranoia Agent, I think, is a show, too.
Yeah. So all movies or shows, like kind of in that vein of older anime that people hold in very high regard. And Phil, although we don't know anybody ourselves, well, we do know one person who you can plug here at some point in the episode. We don't really know many people that were talking about Tokyo Godfathers. And that seems to be the case outside of many of your top anime or international film Christmas lists. And that's why this kind of kept coming up. So I'm not surprised, Phil, that this is the first one that we're going to be seeing from this particular director. But I don't know about you. I might be a little interested to see more, and I don't normally say that about older projects.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. So really excited to get into this discussion here. International Feature, Tokyo Godfathers. If you want to know where you can find the rest of our content, as well as all of our social media pages, make sure you stick around to the end of the episode. We'll cover all of that following all of this. So, Eric, let's get into it here. Tokyo Godfathers, released in 2003, as we already mentioned, directed by the incredibly popular Satoshi Kon. A quick synopsis here from Letterboxd. On Christmas Eve, 3 homeless people living on the streets of Tokyo discover a newborn baby among the trash and set out to find its parents. And, I'll do this right away because a good friend of ours will probably make an appearance here very soon. You'll probably hear him in the end of the year awards, which is right around the corner. Want to make sure we plug our buddy Corey, who is the of course host of the World Is My Burrito podcast. He will also be covering this film for his podcast this month, as he reached out to me afterwards after seeing the episode list for the month of December. So just so you guys know, in terms of a real deep dive into this film, you will be able to get that from Corey, who is just great at what he does. So I wanted to make sure we shout out our friend. But yeah, Eric, let's kind of really start here. That was actually one of the questions I wanted to ask you right out of the gate, is if you had seen any of Satoshi Kon's other films. Obviously, like we said, we were supposed to see Magnetic Rose. That ended up not happening. But was curious as far as your familiarity with his library. And you mentioned some of those films there at the top were, other than Tokyo Godfathers, are these films that you would also, just kind of you being the main anime fan here, had kind of circled at one point, and then we just happened to tackle Tokyo Godfathers first?
Yeah, that's pretty much how it ran down. I mean, it's a movie that at Tokyo Godfathers, we just kind of kept seeing on lists because we were actively looking for it. But again, films like Paprika and Perfect Blue, the show, Paranoia Agent, those are all things that I had definitely heard about quite a bit in anime communities. And they're things that I've been interested to watch, but, we've had such a mixed bag of jumping into older anime, both of us in much different ways. So it just never happened. And I like that this, again, gives us the potential, because for a movie that came out in 2003, in that particular era and that style of animation, I gotta say, Phil, this film didn't feel that old. Like, it felt old, but in like that nostalgic type way, and not old with films that we've watched on some of these series for the podcast where we're like, it hasn't aged well. And luckily this movie didn't have that feeling. I thought it looked fairly clean, fairly crisp, and understanding the era that it came out in, giving it that little bit of grace went a long way when it came to enjoying the film for its animation.
Yeah, and I think the term that you're probably looking for, and even though it might come off as disrespectful, is dated. Some of these older films that we have watched while in the moment, I think probably the most, the biggest example, of course, will be like Akira, which, we had very strong feelings about, and watching it in 2023, 2024 is rough. But yeah, you are correct. This is, I think it's because of a lot of the just really, really fantastic like editing and the storyboard for all this. It's a really beautiful film, and I connected to it, I think, a lot of ways that probably you did in terms of these main characters. I mean, the runtime is probably what, do you have it up there in front of you, Eric? Actually, I have it right here. An hour and a half. Excuse me, an hour and a half, which is crazy because I feel like I know so much about these characters in a very, very short runtime. So the fact that they pulled that off, just like you, has left me thinking, okay, we might be onto something here, because we may have to look into more of these films from Satoshi Kon. And I'm glad you did point that out. There is, because of when this film came out, I believe I saw that it started in production in 2001, released in 2003. It was a very, very historic time for Japan in 2003 in terms of transgender rights. That's a very big topic when it comes to this film. And then just make sure you keep in mind, if you have not seen it, there is terminology in here that is very representative of the time. So there's some slurs in here that right in the beginning that really took me off guard, and I was like, uh-oh.
Jordan's favorite movie.
I was like, oh boy, what's about to happen here? But man, was I pleasantly surprised by this. So did you watch this in sub as well? Because there is a dub out there, I believe, that came out in 2020.
Yeah, no, I did not watch the dub. I watched it in sub, and that was specifically because on Amazon Prime it's available to watch with no ads. Well, I have the no ad version of Prime, but you can watch it through Pluto TV, whatever that's called, with ads, and I just wasn't interested in doing that. So yeah, sub it was.
Yeah, and I will say, just again, to also promote the transgender representation in this, Hana is voiced by a transgender woman in the dub, so a lot of really good things, a lot of positive things about the dub. So I think you could watch it either way. At the end of the day, I am glad that I watched it in sub in its like original context, and I think that would be what I would recommend. But I think, again, heard good things from both of them. But yeah, in terms of these three characters, Eric, I mean, we're obviously the whole, the most important part of the film, Hana, Jin, Miyuki. One of the main reasons this really resonated with me, how big we are on Found Family. We spend a lot of time with friends that we're incredibly close with that basically are family now. So that is the kind of one of the main things that holds this film together, is even though they are, they're homeless, they have all these different things in their past that have led them to this point when it comes to either broken homes or embarrassment or just bad relationships with their family. Like, all of that stuff is like core in a lot of what personal stuff that I've gone through. So each one of these characters brought something to the table that I think will resonate with a lot of people.
Yeah, and without getting too far into the story, because for this particular series, we like to keep things as spoiler-free as possible, because we understand a lot of people have not maybe seen this film, and whether we liked it or not, this is one we are featuring for you to potentially check out. So I don't know that we'll have a spoiler section. We might. There's a lot that happens in this movie, and we'll kind of get to how the plot moves along. But we'll kind of keep it spoiler free here in the sense that these three particular characters, Phil, get fleshed out pretty well. So, like, they are the bread and butter of this story. Their dynamic and their relationship with each other and what got them into the predicament that they're in really gets you invested into what's going to happen to each of them and what's going to happen with the story that obviously centers around a child. You would say a miracle child of sorts, which is just, again, a nice combination of seeing how they're treated, how the homeless life is, bringing a child into the mix of all of that, and then all of the chaos and insanity that ensues around that entire situation. I think all of those things, when thrown into the pot, the recipe there is really strong for a film to be able to have a little bit of leeway in its plot when it comes to its story and some of the things that happen. And ultimately, this is your kind of like example of a Christmas movie. I don't know how Christmas it is. We'll kind of talk about that. But it definitely has a lot of the dynamics of your Christmas miracles and things of that nature that I really enjoyed. And you don't let those things slide or you take them more serious if you're not enjoying the characters you're on the journey with. So for that, I really thought that worked overall from a story perspective.
Yeah, and this is where this can work in terms of the animation and the fantastical side of things can work in a quote-unquote Christmas movie. And yeah, I think there is a Christmas movie is like a loose term. It's not as loose of a term as me calling Jurassic World a Christmas movie, but it's like it's just Christmas is there, but it's not necessarily like the main point of what is going on. But yeah, to again bring it back to the characters, Eric, like I said, to have all these, to know so much about all their backstories in a 90-minute runtime is pretty insane. Then they also fit in some solid humor in there, and then a lot of really dark stuff as well. So, going through it, and, there was, like I said in the beginning, a little worried, not really sure how this is going to go. These characters are obviously pretty rough, but, the director is not shying away from how difficult it is for people out there. And even though this is centered in Tokyo, this is not a story that is unique to just Japan. There are people that are cast off everywhere and that are separated from their families and no longer speak to them. Those people exist all over the place. So definitely think this is a solid story for people to watch in 2024. And that's, again, another marvel, Eric, is that it has, even though, like we talked about some of the language that is in the movie, it has aged very well in 21 years, which is, again, not something we've been able to say throughout this series.
No, it's not. And again, I really appreciated everything that the film put together, and all of those things, again, make up for some of that, datedness of the animation. So that's why I think maybe I'm more forgiving for a film like this when we mention Akira and a couple other films that we have watched where we didn't feel that way. Again, I think you have to have a compelling story, and it helps that the movie, while it is touching on many dark themes, movie was funny. I definitely was chuckling from time to time. So this movie just wasn't telling you to grin and bear it. and, you know, really just kind of bite down on the depressing or dark thematics of the film. It really gave you a little bit of hope, and it also gave you a little bit of laughter. So I think when it blends all of those different things together, again, it gives you a good opportunity to enjoy a film at its absolute fullest potential. Are there problems with this film? Sure. But overall, again, a very positive experience, and it's a nice change of pace, because when we brought this up finally, I was like, please, we're finally watching it. Please we can't both hate it. And I think we both fell pretty closely. I'm curious where our scores fall for sure.
Did you get a little worried at any point while watching it about me?
I mean, from the beginning, you know, you put it on and, you know, immediately it's a much older movie.
Yeah.
I went in pretty blind.
It kind of looks like Jingle All the Way, like a grimy Jingle All the Way, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that could work.
Yeah.
On comparison.
It's much better than Jingle All the Way, but I'm just saying, like, in terms of the animation, like, yeah.
As a film, yeah. As a Christmas movie,
yeah.
No.
Oh, no, as a Christmas movie, Jingle All the Way is definitely...
yeah, top tier. But no,
we're
going
to be talking about Santas here pretty soon, just to give you guys a little teaser.
Pretty soon. Yeah, so very exciting stuff on the holiday special there. But I think, Phil, this was, again, I can see why it's viewed as like a classic and why it does come up on the list that it does come up on. I am curious, was there anything, again, keeping it spoiler free, anything that you could critique about the movie, or maybe just wasn't your cup of tea? Didn't work for you?
Yeah, there isn't really too much other than the fact that it is being held back a little bit because of the time. You know, I think if this was remade here today, how many improvements could they make in terms of animation? And that's already, as we mentioned, we already stated, this is a beautiful film. I think it just could be made better with the tools that we have today, and based off of the other projects from Satoshi Kon, I mean, in terms of like just a visual spectacle, this seems like it's only scratching the surface. So I think maybe in comparison to his other films, maybe he didn't push the envelope as much as the other. And that's not necessarily that's not even a real critique. You know, I think maybe some of the stuff in terms of the maybe just one too many Christmas miracles, but like I think the whole point is like this baby is the miracle, and you know they're getting them out of situations, but no, nothing really too nitpicky that I could really think of. I thought the part where they're just walking through the snow and they just come across the man underneath his car was really funny, and then he turns out to be like a pretty popular person, and I won't reveal who that person ends up being, but yeah, like you said, there's a lot of funny moments in here, so and a lot of feel-good moments too, so there's not really anything that I can really think of off of the top of my head, but it's also not, I wouldn't say like it's not going to be like in the top 5 of the films that we've watched either, but still very, very good.
Yeah. Just very curious, because I wonder where our scores are going to land. I think for me, some of the things that I would just caution anyone that's watching it, it's nothing, I think, special in the sense of it's not a fully unique story. It doesn't have anything that you're going to walk away and say, oh, I only really remember that for watching Tokyo Godfathers. Like, it has very similar themes that you've seen elsewhere. Maybe they were inspired by this film, by all means. So it's not to say it's not original, but I will say that when I walked away, I was like, I enjoyed the journey I went on, but it's not a journey I would like rewatch actively. If it was on, I absolutely would check it out. I highly recommend it. But is it one of those movies that from its plot to its characters to its animation that I think is timeless? No, not necessarily. And those things all add up. They're very minor. I think upon rewatch, that only leaves room to go up, though, as far as my final score. But there were just, again, a couple of little things here and there when we talk about the movie that I think it could have done a little bit more of. And maybe that includes an additional like 10, 15 minutes to really let us sit with a couple of things. Though I appreciated it being only an hour and a half. So there's some give and take there. But I think this movie could have used about 10 to 15 more minutes just to flesh out a couple of more character moments that really could have maybe made more of an emotional impact. I never really felt emotional with this movie, though I can definitely see someone relating with it a little bit more and having that connection.
Let me ask you this, Eric. Do you think that that your score and your watch through was affected by it being presented as a Christmas movie? I think that's what it was for me, because I love Klaus a lot more than you do, but like Klaus really made me like feel something, just to kind of compare it to something else we've watched on this series. Do you think that had anything to do with it? Because like when you're watching a Christmas or a holiday movie, you're expecting it to kind of touch on that like holiday magic, and that is here in terms of like the things that they get out of. But again, it just doesn't feel super Christmassy, other than the backdrop is it happens around Christmas time.
A little bit. That definitely is part of it. I will say that when we go over our scores and I reveal where it is in the international feature rankings, I think it will make a little bit of sense. It's actually perfectly in the middle of two other anime films, which I thought was kind of funny.
Got it. Well, yeah, let's go ahead and transition to the reception to this film, as well as our scores. Rotten Tomatoes, no surprises here, 92% tomato meter score, 91% audience score, so very, very high. A 4.2 on Letterboxd, and a 7.8 on IMDb. It's really strange that IMDb seems to be the most harsh rating when it comes to any film, not even just this. So those always seem a little bit lower than they are everywhere else. I ended up giving this a 3.5, and just like you, Eric, I think maybe after a rewatch, and then maybe even watching some of his other films, then I could definitely be persuaded that this is a 4. I very much enjoyed it. It took me by surprise, just kind of going into this a little worried because of how we've reacted to some of these other older anime films, and it impressed me in pretty much every single way. So I understand for sure why this film resonates with so many people, why there are so many YouTube documentaries about it and people telling you how important it is to them, and how important it is when it comes to representation, when it comes to these characters. So I ended up giving a 3.5, but like you, I could definitely see this going up over time.
Yeah, I'm going to echo everything you said right there, because that's exactly where I landed, was a 3.5. Not quite a 4, because again, I don't know that I would actively seek out someone to watch this movie with me. And will I watch it again, like a full watch through? I just don't know. But upon another watch through, I definitely think that I could end up liking it even more now that I know where the story goes. And that's always a great place to be with a film. A 3.5, very, very respectable score here, especially given, again, the time that it came out. I think that definitely has to be mentioned here. My movies that it actually falls in between. So this is ranked out of the 26 movies that we have ranked on Letterboxd. Ranks at 19, and it's right above Belle, because I do believe it's a better story. It's a little bit more impactful in its story, but not as impactful as the film that it's under, which is Wolf Children. So in comparison to those two anime films, that's kind of the perfect little sandwich. I really think that Wolf Children had a stronger kind of overall story that it presented, in addition to really, really good animation. Again, nothing spectacular, but we wouldn't necessarily call it dated. Where Tokyo Godfathers is held back a little bit in that department. It has a tight story, not as gripping or maybe as resonating for me. And then much more in both of those categories than Belle. Like Belle has modern animation, but it's nothing special. Where Tokyo Godfathers has a little bit of that timelessness behind its animation. And story-wise, I think Tokyo Godfathers is definitely a stronger package than what Belle offers. So yeah, that's where that's where this movie fell for me on my list. What about you, Phil?
Yeah, I have this quite a bit higher than you. I also have it right behind Wolf Children at number 14 and in front of Okja. So to kind of give you an idea of where this, and remember how many of these films that you have much higher that I do not, such as like Boy and the Heron and some of those other movies. So, but yeah, no, I agree with you, because like that's the counter argument to what I said earlier is like, could this have benefited from a little bit more modern technology? But we have Belle, which is okay, and it looks beautiful, but but Tokyo Godfathers, when you just put it on, even though, again, because of the backdrop of Christmas, it kind of gives you that idea of like, oh, I'm about to watch something that's really, really good. And even though it's a little shocking out of the gate, but they have removed some of that stuff in the dub, and it's been updated, which is nice. But it is a very important movie when it comes to Japanese culture at that time, and it continues to be that. So very much enjoyed it. And again, just it was like a sigh of relief, like, oh man, thank goodness that we enjoyed this movie, because I don't know how many more we could do where we're like, this is going to be rough. But yeah, we don't do similar films whether for this series, do we? We're gonna do that?
No, I think we've done it if it makes sense. Looking at the list, I don't think it makes sense. There are
if you want to do Santa Claus 3.
No, we're not.
Why is this on here? That's not a similar film at all.
I don't know why it's on there. I was gonna say the only films that were on here, I'm pretty sure you have ranked higher. Although Akira was late to the party, I know you would watch this over that, and then you would watch this over Porco Rosso. So those are the two movies we've. Those are the two movies on either Late to the Party or International Feature that we would have done. Everything else is, again, Paprika, Perfect Blue, films underneath his filmography, and again, films I've heard really great things about. So there's absolutely, the door is open to go back to one of these again in the future. And I mean, there's some good stuff here. There's some good stuff. Yeah. So if we are going to move away from Miyazaki and Ghibli, because that is clearly not Phil's bag, maybe this is an area we can go into. I'd be curious to see what your tolerance level is to go that far back. So
between him and Hosada, it just seems like I have a different preference when it comes to these anime films. I will say, and I'm not going to shout out the name of the podcast because they pissed me off. There was one guy, I watched another video because they were talking about this film, and the guy was like, he was saying how much he hates anime films in general, and he said that the only ones he had ever really seen though were like the Jujutsu Kaisen one, and then also
I watched that same
video. You watched that video too?
Yeah.
And you know how I feel about it. At least I've seen The Boy and the Heron in theaters. At least I've seen and watched these movies.
And he said he liked that one, yeah.
And I was like, you kidding me right now?
I'm going to shout him out because I actually don't mind them, but Trash Taste is the podcast. And
pissed me off.
Yeah, I like
all he was watching is
videos.
He was watching is like shonen anime movies. I'm like, I don't even do that.
I'll say I watch one of the guys, Giga. I watch a lot of his like year in review film YouTube videos because they're very well made. He's the one in the, he's the, yeah. I don't even know how to describe one. It's gonna be racist. The main one. I like his YouTube presentation and his commentary, and it's just funny and very well done. But yeah, the other two, I don't really watch their solo stuff. So whenever I watch Trash Taste, I'm like, I usually tune out after a bit. I usually watch the clips. So that's what that is.
Yeah. So, but there you have it, folks. Definitely recommend checking out Tokyo Godfathers. And once again, shout out to Corey, The World Is My Burrito. If you want even more of a deep dive into the cultural significance of this film, highly recommend going to go check out that episode. Not sure exactly when it will be out. All I know is he is prepping for it. Should be this month or the next, but he is doing quite the deep dive into that. But Eric, anything else we need to mention before we wrap this thing up?
No, I think we are good to go, and we can close this up. Appreciate all of you guys. If you are listening in the month of December, we did have a bonus episode that recently dropped, so you should definitely check that out. And the end of the year awards coming up. Going into next year, we'll be recording a lot of content going forward. So while we're still around the timeline, I'm gonna plug it. But going into next year, guys, a lot of stuff coming down. So stick with us.
Yeah, and that episode Eric is talking about is a discussion with director Warren Skeels as we discuss The Man in the White Van. By the time this episode releases, it'll be out on in theaters on December 13th. So make sure you check that out. Next week is the Game Room Where It Happens. Eric, we have been playing Marvel Rivals, getting our asses kicked, but having a lot of fun. So hopefully that episode, we'll see how we feel a week from now when we talk about it, if any of that changes. But if you want to find the rest of our content, the rest of the international feature episodes, or anything else, you can find it in the Linktree link in the show notes of this episode. You'll also find all of our social media pages, the most important ones to keep up with being Instagram, TikTok, our Discord channel, as well as YouTube. If you want to support and also our Twitch channel, where we stream every other week. If you want to support the show, you can do a couple of things. You can head on over to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you're listening. Leave us a 5-star review. That is so incredibly helpful. Head on over to YouTube, give us a thumbs up, turn on notifications, subscribe, all of that, and just share the content. Let people know that you're listening. Let us know that you're listening. All that goes a very, very long way as we turn the corner into 2025. But once again, as I mentioned, I think last week, if you want some more Wait For It podcast under the tree, you want to be like, hey, Santa, hook me up with some more behind the scenes Wait For It podcast stuff. Eric will let you know how you can reach out to the North Pole and request all of that right now, in case there's children listening.
I was like, what audience are we trying to bring over there? No, children do not sign up for our Patreon, but adults, you have money, which is great, and you can take those funds and move them over to Patreon in exchange for things like early access and behind the scenes to episodes like this one. We're also working on some bonus content going into 2025, so definitely something to look forward there, and also a great way to get in contact with us in a smaller community alongside patrons like Stefan, Breyer, T3 Cato, and Corey. Thank you guys for supporting the show. With that all being said, my name is Mr. Eric Almighty. That is my co-host, Philip Filipino. And please don't forget, we release new episodes every Wednesday on the podcast, including bonus content on platforms like TikTok and Twitch. And all you have to do is wait for it.
So, I heard you're looking for a go-to source for entertainment.
Wait for it.
Gaming?
Wait for it.
Anime?
Plus Ultra!
Mr. Eric Almighty and Phil the Filipino? Yeah, they've got you covered. And all you gotta do is wait for it. This is the Wait For It podcast.